Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Blitzkrieg, our own strategic affairs show. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the Iranian nuclear scientist, the father of the Iranian nuclear program, was assassinated in a plot that seemed right out of Hollywood. A remote-controlled weapon was rigged on top of a vehicle and he was shot dead. Now, this is not why this program is, being conducted today. This is not the reason why I have requested my esteemed guest to join me. The question that bothers me is something deeper. And I'm going to introduce you to Colonel DPK Pillai, Shaurya Chakra, war hero. And he's here with us today. Colonel Pillai, sir, a very, very warm welcome to our show, sir. It's an honor and a privilege to have you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Sir, my first question to you is, sir, nations seem to take executive action at will. Now, people are saying that the Israelis have done it. We don't know who's done it. Nobody's owned up to it. But people are saying that the modus operandi is typical Israeli. This is something that the Mossad would do. So, these are all assumptions and this is all rumor today. But this is what people are saying. But nation states, even modern nation states, have been known to take executive action, be it the Chinese, the Russians, the British, the Americans, the French, anybody takes executive action when they feel that their sovereignty or their national interests are at stake, sir. And many of these actions, in fact, most of these actions are beyond international law. They could be said to be illegal or at least immoral at best. What is your take on this concept of nations taking executive action, sir?
In terms of modern states like post-World War, we had a lot of instances of countries taking action to eliminate potential targets who are not in their custody. Essentially, targeted killings is about killing people who are not in your custody. They are and the means that you use is it's not honorable. It's not like a war, but the war, like a soldier is allowed to use his weapons against someone else to eliminate a threat. But the fact is that targeted killings is against a person who is not in your custody and he doesn't know he's being targeted. Now, if you look at our own country, we've had a large number of assassinations that have taken place. We know about Homi Bhabha, who was killed, and there were some recent CIA disclosures which said very clearly that Homi Bhabha was a threat, because in October of '65 he had said that we are just 18 months away from making a bomb, and he was assassinated. In '71 we had Vikram Sarabhai, who was killed. And if you look at our own country, a large number of our nuclear and space scientists have been killed or committed suicide. And it's surprising that we really don't have any kind of an investigation that's going on into their deaths. So the fact remains is that these kind of actions have been taking place in the past. The greatest example that we have is the Black September that was eliminated after the Munich Olympics, in which Golda Meir gave an action and an order to kind of eliminate those involved in this killing of this Israeli athletes, and most of them were eliminated. And there was also an embarrassment where the Israelis used a Canadian passport, and there was a big fracas because they targeted the wrong guy. And the Israelis have been using it, and the Americans have also been using it. If you remember, Operation Phoenix in Vietnam was about eliminating Viet Cong leaders, and they also tried to assassinate Fidel Castro and Lubungo in Congo. And there was a congressional hearing, and then Ford had passed an order that American agencies would not be used for assassination, which was Jimmy Carter further endorsed in 1978. And there was very ambiguity in those things. But after 2001 9/11 attack, Americans have also been very blatant in the use of targeted attacks, and they've used those means and methods to eliminate potential targets. So if you ask me whether these things really help, eliminating targets does help or not, I think it really helps. If you remember, there was an assassination attempt against Hitler, and he left the beer hall putsch in Munich. He left 1.5 minutes before, and he never got killed, and we wouldn't have gone through a World War II, because you can't produce a Hitler. And you see what's happened after the elimination of ISIS, Baghdadi and others. The entire thing changes. One person makes a difference. Like LTT, after the killing of Prabhakaran, is over. So I do think that targeted killings do work, though academics will say that it's against international law and it's against this thing. But I believe it'll be so nice that you don't have to really go to war, and large number of lives are saved if you kill the brains behind that. And Hitler is the greatest example. We would have avoided the World War II, and 6 million Jews wouldn't have been killed, and the world wouldn't have been at war. Though indirectly the World War II helped India gain independence because it decimated the British capabilities. But I'm just giving an example.
Absolutely, sir. My next question is, do you think there is going to be any local fallout or global fallout? Because you see, General Soleimani was similarly assassinated, which the Americans owned up to. In this case, in case of Fakhrizadeh, it was not owned up by anybody. Nobody has claimed responsibility. However, sir, do you think there's going to be any fallout in the region?
You know, it's very interesting times that we are living in. We have a new president being sworn in very shortly. And if you look at, you know, I don't know, there was a Kuwaiti newspaper which had declared that Soleimani was to be killed sometime much before then. He was killed early this year. It was the Americans who tipped off the Iranians because they wanted to get the JCPOA deal, the Iranian deal through. And so Soleimani was tipped off, and that thing had never happened. But the fact is that he was killed. He was one of the most popular leaders Iran has ever seen. In fact, there's nobody like Soleimani. I was in Iraq and the Middle East. He was the person, in fact, he's famously reported to have written to Petraeus that I am the person in charge of everything that happens from, you know, from Iraq, Syria, and those countries, Lebanon and others. So he was the man behind the Quds force. That was a complete network that created. In fact, in Iraq, you find Soleimani was quite a popular figure because it was the Popular Mobilization Front, which was completely funded and trained by the IRGC, the Quds force, headed by Soleimani, a Major General. And he was the person, and they thought that eliminating him would lead to a war, but it never happened. We never saw retaliation, and they said that Iranian have said that he's showing some restraint. And similarly, Brigadier was also, he was a brigadier and the nuclear scientist. He was the AQ Khan, if you can call him, of the Iranian nuclear program. And the speed with which the Iranians have gone around saying that they're going to enrich the uranium and others, and now you have, in January, you have a new president. So I don't know what is the fallout going to be. You have a government that is very keen to mainstream Iran into their calculus. So let's see what happens. We live in very interesting times. The retaliation, I don't think they retaliated, and I don't think they would be able to retaliate because they've been completely in the sanctions, and others have really inhibited their capacities. The elimination of Soleimani and their networks have been decapacitated in many ways. So I don't see an ability other than sporadic, use of rocket attacks here and there, and I don't see a high-profile action taking place.
Ill-aimed Katyusha rockets, sir. Iran doesn't have that kind of technology also, and I mean a few rocket attacks here and there just to let out steam is also what I would think is the maximum that Iran will be able to do. My next question to you is, sir, do you think India should have a similar policy? And after that, I'm going to ask you if there is a historical context, but that is another question, sir. I want to know from you, should India have a similar policy? Because we have a set of people in India, a large set of people in India, who have been brought up in this entire environment of morality. Now, they think that this should not be done. Targeted assassinations should not be done. Targeted killings should not be done. So I'm talking about the present time, sir. And my next question, I'm telling you in advance, sir, is going to be about our history, ancient times, whether this happened or not. But first, I'd like you to answer this, sir. Should India have an Israel-like or an America-like policy? Do we have the wherewithal? Do we have the capability? Because to achieve any operational result, you need capability and intent, sir. So I'm sure we have the capability, but do we have the intent? Or if we have the intent, do we have the capability?
There's a lot of problems that liberal democracies face in terms of carrying out such actions, because Definitely, targeted killings is not sanctioned by by law. It doesn't, it borders. In fact, it was a very interesting case when the second intifada started in Israel, and the Israelis had repeatedly requested the Palestinian Authority for handing over certain important leaders, and they would refuse to hand over. And then they carried out, targeted. They used Apache helicopters, used missiles, eliminated them, and it went on. The list is endless. There's Retd, Adani, many of them who've been actually eliminated by this method. And there's also, it served to appease the public in Israel. Israel, inhabits a very tiny sliver of land in that area, surrounded completely by hostile nations that have been actually trying to eliminate. In fact, Iran denies the existence of the Holocaust and others, and it's an existential threat for them. And in Iran with a nuclear arm, with that bad intent that they've already expressed in so many words. So there's one democracy here, and they need to appease the people, and it has really helped. In fact, if you study the patterns, the number of fatalities have come down. So, and then this case went up to the Supreme Court, and now to the credit of the Supreme Court, neither condemned the targeted assassinations, or they have a different word for that. It's called frustrating terrorism, and neither condemned them nor commended them for these, but it laid out a certain sets of do's and don'ts and others about. So now in India, I want to give you an example. Like in 1971, we had 93,000 prisoners of war. We had a completely decimated Pakistan, but yet we didn't really go the whole hog and negotiate for eliminating our problem that was there with Kashmir. Neither did we go and negotiate for our people. So I really don't understand. There are a lot of things that we're not able to grasp the capabilities that we have. The potential of our country is not really unleashed in terms of, and we've been victims. Right from day one. We've had 3 prime ministers who died under, like, of course, Indira Gandhi was killed, Rajiv Gandhi, Lal Bahadur Shastri died. We had a host of nuclear scientists, Homi Bada, killed by a bomb blast that went off in Kanchenjunga when he was going to Israel. They had Sarabhai, a teetotaler, non-smoker, non-drinker, dies mysteriously at a very young age in Kovalam. And you have a large, if you look, I'm really surprised that we're quiet about the large number of nuclear scientists that are being either committing suicides or being. In fact, there were 2 nuclear scientists working on the INS Arya in Vijayawada, in Visakhapatnam, who were actually put on the railway track, but an alert passerby discovered 2 bodies lying there, and then there was no investigation. So we are victims of targeted killings, and whether we are capable of executing them, it's just lack of imagination of our people of what is possible. And it is, if you can imagine, you can prevent larger casualties. There's nothing wrong in carrying out preventive strikes on the leader. Like, you've killed Baghdadi, you killed Zawahiri, you killed Osama bin Laden, and it decimates the capacities of the organization. You've seen it in all over the world, and it happens. And I think it is time that we had, well, we've been victim. Even in Kashmir, pro-Pakistani forces killed Sajan Lone. We had a large number of people, like the Maoists have eliminated, the CPIM cadres have eliminated people who are, seen as a stumbling block. But as a state, India has, I don't think in independent India, that is the modern 1947, has ever executed such operations.
So now coming back to what you had hinted on in your previous statement, do you think it is time we built this capacity? Because there is no getting around this, sir. For example, the Prime Minister in his speech said last year that in the past 30 years in the Kashmir Valley, we have lost 42,000 Indian citizens, sir. Only in 30 years, we've lost 42,000 Indian citizens to Pakistani-sponsored violence. Now, I'm painting a scenario which is odd because both of us are sitting in India, but had it been Israel or America, they would have done it long back without painting a scenario at all. Russia would have done it without thinking about it, sir. Now, let us say there is a Hafiz Saeed, sir. let us say that there is Maulana Masood Azhar or any of these people who train, fund, finance, motivate terrorists, send them to India to kill innocent people, attack security forces. Now, we know where they live. Do you think it is high time India developed this capacity to send people across our borders to eliminate threats? That is part one of my question, sir. And part two is, what is required to develop this capability?
See, if you study, I'll take the second part of it. To develop that capability, you need people on ground. So Osama bin Laden was located by the polio doctor, and the informers have actually informed. You need to be pretty accurate about their movements and all to carry out targeted killings. So you can't just randomly go and bomb civilians. It's against international law. It'll create a lot of hue and cry, like what happened in the Black September attack, where they killed an innocent man, and you had an international row where Canadians in Norway got very angry with Israel. So we should be careful about this. Second, I want to tell you is one. In this, when you're dealing with a country like Pakistan, which is an artificial construct, it's a country that has come up. It served the geopolitical interest of a departing colonial power to have a country like Pakistan to allow, and it served them well. And it was really a country. It was never meant to be a haven for the Muslims. It was just something to create, and we've spent a lot of money. The fact is that we need to eliminate the idea of on which Pakistan, because Pakistan is not run by people of Pakistan, it's run by the army of Pakistan. So one Hafiz Saeed eliminated would also result in another generation of them being created by them. So when you're dealing with a country which is like a state, which is like has a voting right in the United Nations, it's not a terror organization. It has a on the face of it, it has a it's a democracy. So I think the problem is dealing with a country like Pakistan, and here all other countries have an army. Pakistan, the army has a country to run, and that's where you deal. So whether we may succeed in Hafiz Saeed, they will actually create another. And if you look at it, it actually stems up from the 1979 invasion of Afghanistan that allowed them to realize the potential of use of terror. And Pakistanis, the ISI, along with the CIA, and took on a mighty country like Soviet Union and armed mujahideen, and they specialized in this art of actually creating terror groups. And if India sends technocrats and engineers and others abroad, they send Pakistan specializes in creating terrorists, and they create world-class terrorists. So it is said that anywhere, any terrorist you meet anywhere, he has a Pakistani stamp on his passport. So it has. So the thing is that we must understand, like while targeted killings are is a preemptive measure, and in a state where we are neither at war nor at peace, Article 51 of the United Nations Charter allows us to act in self-defense, and it's perfectly legal to actually eliminate people who are involved in the act of war against India. So it's very much in the charter of the country to actually decide to use force against, to preemptively use force to eliminate threats. So I think we should have a policy, and we should create, and I must tell you, the capacities of our Indian, whether it's our agencies, inter-agencies, or whether it's our regular stuff, the potential is unlimited. India is an amazing country. I've always been fascinated by our ability to strike back. Like we were at a country which is 2% of the world's. Today we are running in the top 8 economies of the world. So it's not just in the military prowess. The British Empire ran its entire empire's business because of the might of Indian soldiers. They won a large the Burma campaign. Against the Japs, and entire thing in Africa and other places. It is all Indian soldiers. So it's not that we don't have the potential. We have. It's the vision and the ability to use force strategically to eliminate your threats, to have a long-term vision, to understand. And we have always been victims. Like you said, we've lost so many thousands of innocent civilian and servicemen in Kashmir. We've lost many of our political leaders. We've lost many of our people. But we've never actually turned the tide and turned the table on them. So it's time that stop being victim and take control of the narrative. The narrative can be controlled if we really, we can alter the status quo. We have a tendency to, we need to have a stable Pakistan kind of a theory. But Pakistan is not a stable, it's not technically supposed to be. It was kept artificially stable because of the support from Britain and USA and others, and now that kind of a construct is not required.
Absolutely. So my last question is actually not a question, and I just want a small comment, sir. I'm saying that even if they manage, you kill Hafiz Saeed, and Pakistan managed to create 10 other Hafiz Saids, but at least Hafiz Saeed will know that somebody is hunting him. So even if it is a failed assassination attempt, he will not be able to sleep in peace in the same room or the same house every night. That is what my entire slant was. The idea was that, sir, he should not be resting his head on the same pillow every night in peace.
That I agree.
He must know that people are hunting him, sir.
That happens in, you see in the Palestinian case where the Hamas and the Al-Aqsa Brigade and other leaders don't really move around in the manner that they used to do earlier till the targeted killings, because there's a constant fear about the movements being monitored and others. So it does actually create a lot of dysfunctional capacities. So while these kind of things do affect your command and control, and it does really has an impact on the ability of terror groups to carry out, plan, execute operations. I think it does have an element of fear, and when you operate under fear, you really don't operate at optimum capacity.
Thank you very much for joining us, sir. It was indeed a pleasure, privilege and an honor to have you on our show once again.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, with Colonel D.P.K. Pillai, Shaurya Chakra, we discussed a lot of things. And especially about targeted assassinations. And my entire idea of having this program today was simple, that India must develop this capacity. For too long, we have bled while the enemy has watched in satisfaction and clapped. It is time India hit back. And the other reason why I wanted to have this program today was that I want to actually go ahead and mainstream this conversation about having the capability to strike across our borders. This entire thing about, war being fought between two armies, honor against honor, is all very fine. And I support that. I worn the uniform myself, and so has my honored guest. But at the same time, nations need to have this capacity to hit back hard as and when required. Thank you for joining us. I'll be back next week with another special guest. Till then, from my team and I, Jai Hind.